friends, thank you so much for watching this video. So I just started a new series on Patreon. It's about painting still life, and in this video I wanted to quickly show you what pieces we're painting, but also talk about how to create that light and shadows, how to paint light and shadows, how to create a contrast in your painting. I'm going to start with some examples. For example, for this vase, how did I go about the contrast? First of all, what made it easier for me to break it down into stages was basically the fact that it's kind of like a grayish reference image, like the picture, right? So I knew right away that to create a shade of gray, all I need is yellow, blue, and red. And so those were my main colors to use for this painting. Next thing was just studying basically the reference to figuring out where's that light and shadows. We need to create a contrast, and with that light we have no shadows, no light, no shadows, no shadows, no light, no contrast, no dimension. So when you look at this image, I marked the areas that are the most highlighted. Those are like whiter areas, and in a lot of those areas I actually used masking fluid for watercolors. It helped a lot because once I removed the masking, I saw right away a huge contrast. But it's not also just using the masking, it's also how you apply the colors, where you apply the colors. Once I had the mix of yellow, blue, and red on my palette, I would grab different ratios between those colors, but also ratios between water and paint, because it all depends how much water I need in my paint. And then I would apply it toward the most shadowed areas that I would see in the reference image, just like you see it here. Having the masking makes it much easier because I don't have to worry so much about losing that light. Also, it prevents the paint from bleeding too much toward those lighter areas. So I'm applying colors toward the darkest areas that I can see in that reference image. This is all done wet on wet, and you can see the separation of colors because I'm mixing colors on the paper, not my palette. So when I say I have a shade of gray, it is literally the yellow, blue, and red together. Whether I paint a vase or a tea kettle, the steps are the same pretty much when it comes down to light and shadows. When I look at the reference, I determine what is the lightest part of that tea kettle on the top and then over the main body of the tea kettle, and I apply colors toward the most shadowed areas, and the same colors pretty much, yellow, blue, red, because the overall kettle, the color of the kettle is white. Yes, it does have a red handle and then it has the red flowers, but I don't focus on those at first. I'm thinking about just the whiteness that I need to recreate with watercolors. So all that pattern of flowers and the handle, that comes later. However, when I do paint those flowers, I also have to think about light and shadows. So in some areas, I need to make these flowers a little darker, and that's when I would use or add a complementary color to my red, because green is a complementary color to red. So I would add a little bit of green to that red, or even blue, since to create a shade of green, I do need to use blue anyways. So once you're done with the overall body of the tea kettle, everything becomes just much easier, and it's just a matter of the composition where you want to add the flowers. My last object is the porcelain cup. Same thing. I use masking fluid for watercolors to mask the most highlighted areas and where I don't want the color to go in. So that prevents the colors to bleed over. I focus on the shadowed areas, but not only. I'm also using a color to recreate that shade of white. So for this class as well, I'm using yellow, blue, and red together. And I'm paying attention to the ratios between water and paint. So crucial. So at the beginning, I start with paint that feels like water to milk like ratio. Then I slowly start to decrease the amount of water in my paint on that brush. So it becomes more like a half and half like ratio. Then something that feels like heavy cream. And at the very end, it becomes more like cream top like ratio between water and paint. And my favorite part, once we remove the masking, that's when the magic happens. Then you realize how worth it was to apply that masking and how much more contrast we see in that painting right away. Sometimes the contrast coming from masking fluid is too great, and that's when I use a little bit of a color or I reactivate colors next to the area of the masking fluid so the transition is softer. I would like to invite you to join me to paint this series on Patreon. The link is below this video, but also right here, www.patreon.com/Maria Mordane. I hope to see you there.